Amongst all the madness of Mandelson and Andrew and junior doctors, we've sort of missed an hour and a half into the show today. More migrant madness, Will, over the weekend. A couple of stories that just leave you, I mean, I don't even say as a Brit, just as a sort of common sense person wondering what the hell's going on in the world. An Albanian thief has escaped deportation after saying this to the judge. No, you can't send me. My husband made me steal it. Please let me stay. And the judge goes, OK, you can stay as well. And the other, an Egyptian small boat migrant jailed for raping a British girl, told his lawyer he deserves punishment. I don't care how long I serve, just don't send me back because the prisons here are nicer than at home. How soft have we become, Will Kingston?
Very. The sad thing is, Jeremy, these aren't even the worst cases I've heard in this genre in recent months. In a nutshell, you have now a tangled, interconnected series of laws that make it incredibly easy for scumbags to enter this country. And you have an ideologically captured judiciary that cynically uses those laws to keep those scumbags in the country. And the lesson is, if you are going to make any fundamental changes as a reform government, for example, to both the legal and illegal immigration problems this country faces, you need to get rid of those laws like the Human Rights Act and the ECHR, and you need to sweep out all of these progressive judges that effectively use the bench as a way for them to virtue signal for their progressive, liberal Islington mates. It's as simple as that.
I couldn't agree more. And interestingly, frighteningly, alongside what you described as progressive judges, and bear in mind that our Prime Minister, the human rights guru lawyer, if I was in power, I would do something about those human rights laws. It's quite how the British taxpayer is supposed to pay for people who shouldn't be here to use the services of people who've got only one thing to do, is to make themselves look good, no common sense. But also, scarily under this government, Will, they want to get rid of juries. So it would be even more cases, in fact, across the board in this country, if Calamity Lammy has his way, where a progressive judge would be able, as you quite rightly say, to make an opinion. Frightening, and no common sense.
Yeah, I suspect the jury's policy will be yet another Labor U-turn, so I'm not as worried about that, fingers crossed. But you mentioned the cost to the taxpayer, and that's what crossed my mind when I was reading that story about the Albanians. Almost always the way that these work is that the lower immigration tribunal X whatever appeal comes up from these, Albanian scumbags, and then it goes up to a higher court, and they then go, oh, well, the lower court was wrong, therefore they're going to be allowed to stay. And I imagine that takes years. It takes, publicly funded lawyers who are representing these people. The amount of money that must just go into this process for the return of keeping people in this country, who will no doubt then go on benefits in a large percentage of the time, is just frightening. It's absolutely frightening.
And I don't understand the logic behind it. This is my issue almost every morning. Your country's skint, you refuse to use an asset that we've got, Keir Starmer, which is North Sea oil. You go ahead with these crazy things, whether it's trying to be clean on energy and costing us more, or give away sovereign islands, or money that gets found that to give doctors a 30% pay rise and then they want more, and yet your average hard-working Brit, keep saying it, is really struggling. And that word fairness comes to me the whole time. There's no fairness. There's no fairness in illegal migrants. There's no fairness in an establishment that get away with perpetrating crimes. We are too soft to people we should be harder with, and too hard on the people, I think, who pay into the system and deserve looking after.
There's a line that runs through each of the examples you've just given: net zero, Chagos, and immigration madness. And that is that the people who run this country think that there is something that is more important than the best interests of the British people. And that is some higher rules-based order, human rights, the rights of everyone around the world, as opposed to the best interests of the British people, which is why you see repeatedly now a government that doesn't put the British people first. That's what happens when you have a government which is quite literally led by international human rights lawyers, as opposed to led by everyday normal people who recognise that in any country, in any democracy, the rights of the people should go as the number one priority for any government.
Pete, serious question. We wake up to allegations about Mandelson, the Dark Lord, a potential criminal offence, leaking sensitive Downing Street emails and inside information. We've heard about Andrew, about, the pictures, the rumours of more Russian girls being sent by Epstein. Do you believe that the Met should or will open or reopen cases into both of these two shameless individuals? Yes or no?
They must. The Met do not have a choice now. Politicians are lobbying them to open an investigation, and it would appear that there are sufficient grounds now to open an investigation into the actions, the behaviour of both Mandelson and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. I think what the Met need to do is go public very quickly to assuage public fears, to announce any such investigation, and then, of course, to start looking across the pond to the Atlantic to who can they work with out there, be that the FBI, maybe even there's reason to liaise with the CIA. But this investigation needs to be done. The public are going to demand it, as well as the politicians, and it needs to be a relentless search for evidence. And I would urge people to remember that they will need to discover evidence. Of course, people can say there's no smoke without fire, and that's all well and good, but the detectives will need to gather evidence.
You will know much more than all of us. I've been asking all morning, can the Americans enforce calling either Mandelson and Andrew or both to Congress to testify?
I believe they can compel them to come and give evidence. The whole question is, though, are they able to sanction them if they refuse? That'll come down to whether people can be compelled from another jurisdiction, because it would appear that Mandelson and Mountbatten Windsor are both very much in the UK. I'm not entirely sure of Congress's global reach in terms of being able to compel them. If they were in the States, that really wouldn't be a problem. Once again, the people who will benefit from all of this shenanigans will be the lawyers.
I agree. It's so murky. And one of the things that's come through this morning, mate, which you would understand, because you've always talked very openly and honestly about how the British people should be able to think that their police force is there to protect victims and to punish people who commit crimes. So many people this morning, Pete, saying, it'll be a cover-up. You know, the grooming gangs, the rape gangs inquiry has been a cover-up by so many people in the establishment. You're talking here not just about Mandelson, who's probably got dirt on every single person in the Labour Party by all accounts, but also the son of our former wonderful, amazing Queen. Thank God she's not here anymore to see this. I completely agree with that last texter. But do you honestly think, can you see a member of the royal family going to prison anywhere in the future? Can you imagine that?
Well, we beheaded them centuries ago, so I live in hope, should there be sufficient evidence, of course. And for me, it's all about the evidence. I completely understand why anybody in the UK would be cynical. I completely get that. Look at how the establishment, in repeated situations over the last few decades in my lifetime, has covered up and covered up and covered up. Hillsborough being one of the most notable and shameful examples of that, and others where the establishment closes ranks, protects itself. Never mind the little people, they'll go away. We hold all the cards. We are rapidly heading towards being a very low-trust society, in that people will not trust any of the establishment, whether that be the police, politicians, the NHS, local councils, anybody in authority. We are headlong towards that low-trust society where no one in a position of authority will be believed, will be trusted, will be respected. And when you become a low-trust society, it's been shown around the world for a very, very long time, then very bad things happen.
If the police do get involved, would they have to go to Andrew's home, or would they be able to call an ex-royal prince in to see them at a police station?
Again, that will all depend on whether there are grounds, for example, to apply for a search warrant, or whether there are sufficient grounds for an inspector to authorise a search. It's all about the evidence. If there's grounds to act, then they will need to act. But of course, getting grounds for an inspector to sign off a warrant or going to court and having a warrant issued, you have to lay out information, you've got to give evidence, the grounds must be there, and the police, of course, must act lawfully. And that is what they are going to be poring over, I'm absolutely sure. It would appear to me, from what I'm seeing at a distance in the media today, that Mandelson certainly has an awful lot of questions to answer. And I would urge the Met to really make a public statement as soon as they possibly can and get those detectives on those planes, or at least on those Zoom meetings, to colleagues in America and saying, and what more have you got, please?
I couldn't agree more, and I think the British people will demand it. And actually, I was just thinking, we've only got a minute, but actually, the Met has had, quite rightly, awful headlines and a really poor reaction to some pretty bad decisions it's taken. This would be an opportunity for somebody in the Met this morning to go, this is our moment, like you said, to stand up and do something about that, because the British people are not going to allow Mandelson or Andrew out of this. It's just murky, Pete, isn't it? The whole thing's murky.
British policing is in crisis. Of that there is absolutely no doubt, as is the criminal justice system. This is a moment for the Met Police to stand up, be counted, and try and win back a grain of public trust.
You've always sided with how hard it is to be a doctor. We've always talked about this for years. But I got to tell you, mate, there is little or no public sympathy left. You can carry on talking about, not you, junior doctors, about, you know, oh, in real terms. But you try explaining to hard-working Brits that on the face of it you've got 28.9% and yet nurses have got 5%, and you want more. They're going to laugh in your face, Aaron.
Jeremy, it worries me so much, not so much about whether doctors are voting to strike. You know, we all think we're worth more, and I do think you should pay nurses more. I do think doctors do deserve a pay rise, but there has to be a reality that you don't go into medicine for money. And I'm really worried about the next generation of doctors who, in my time as a junior doctor, or now resident doctors, we would never have thought of striking. And that was the time when you were doing 48-hour on-calls, 7 days a week. It was known as a tough job to be a junior doctor, always has been. But you always thought the reward was when you got those senior positions, and then that pay rise would come in, and obviously lifestyle would fit in with it. It is a vocation. It's something that we need to want to do. And I'm worried this next generation of doctors don't see medicine like that. I worry that they see it as a little bit of a cash cow, and that they're thinking we can just keep voting to strike, which should be a last resort. We are putting people at harm. There is no way these doctors will be striking and not putting the NHS backwards or putting patients at risk.
I like what you said about, I'd written down here vocational before you started speaking, but I wrote something that you said, tough on the way up. Maybe we are old. Maybe this generation is, as people say, entitled and expects things too easy. If you look at a benefit system that has become a career choice, maybe that explains some of the problems we've got. But you said something that nobody said before, which is we did the job because we believed in it, but we knew we'd have to put in the hard yards to get to the point where we became... It's like any job, but that's how we all started. Everybody jokes when I tell them my first job. It's ridiculous, right? Stacking bananas in a supermarket, right? But that doesn't happen nowadays. That sort of, you know, that start at the bottom. They expect to start... somebody was telling me a story the other day. Had a guy who lives near them, let's say, in council accommodation. He's got a new car, mobility car. He's got a Sky Dish. Doesn't work, has never worked, isn't injured. And there's nothing wrong with him. And freely knows that he's abusing a system and has no desire to do anything about it. What's happened to that desire? Because we wanted to get on, didn't we? We wanted to make something of our lives and be successful. That's gone, mate. That has to be because society has made it too easy with these sorts of pay rises. These people should work harder, surely.
I absolutely believe 30% is a very, very good pay rise. And if you look at what happened across the border with Scotland, they've agreed to sit back round the table. They're not taking this type of action because they know how devastating it is for their patients. The BMA really needs to be talking back to these doctors and saying, look, you've actually had, I think, really on paper, a phenomenal pay rise compared to paramedics, compared to nurses, compared to any other healthcare professional. So what you've got here is about continuing those talks. I understand the issues also about jobs as well. I do understand there's a bottleneck with jobs and that a lot of our local candidates aren't getting voted against other doctors coming in from abroad. But this needs to be worked out with placements. This needs to be worked out with a long-term strategy. But voting to strike, it's just an acute way of actually just trying to put the arm around the back of the government's back and forcing them to do something which really isn't going to get us anywhere.
Now, do you think that they should be banned from striking? Many people argue that doctors, like the military aren't allowed to strike, police aren't allowed to strike. Do you think it should be taken off the table for doctors?
I think if they continue with this type of action, I mean, how many strikes have we had? 14? You know, this is now not becoming when it initially started, it was an absolute shock horror. The public support was right behind them. They thought, why would they be doing this unless it was very unjust? Now people are really starting to think, and I am one of them, why are they doing this? This just looks greedy. And I think if they're not careful about taking this type of strike action, it will be taken away from them because the government won't really have many other options to do it.
I think that the argument about the BMA is actually how many of the real doctors it represents, whether it's become too powerful or whether actually, you know, it is too political and it's gone beyond, as you quite rightly say, either its members or what's right for the NHS.
I actually think that this had a 93% support, but only 53% of doctors actually voted for it. And I do worry that actually what's going to happen here is that we're going to have a BMA which is going to be fractured and it's going to be split. And we're going to have to be very careful about, is it really representing the doctors that it's meant to be representing?
Hi, Jez, says Sarah. What bothers me about doctor strikes is the first oath they talk it to do no harm. I completely agree that Dr. Aaron Ghosh, when I go to the doctor, I want to feel cared for, not feel like an inconvenience because they don't get paid enough. It's absolutely right, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I said this last time. I think as a junior doctor, you really need to think very carefully about if you decide to go on that strike, because I think our first duty of care is to do no harm. And there is no way that you're going to be striking again and make sure that's not going to be happening to your patients.
Well, I'll take a call with you. Davey's in Edinburgh. You're with Dr. Aaron Ghosh and me, Davey. Make it quick. What you got, kiddo?
OK, well, when Labour came into the negotiating ploy for the BMA they wanted 23%. That's fact. They actually got 26%. And now here, a year later, they're looking for 30%.
We know that. Do you think it's... I mean, I said to Aaron, right, I don't mean to be rude, can you imagine anybody in the private sector getting even 10% of what they've got already, man? How does it look to the patients?
Well, it's just incredible. They can get the demand that they want, over and above the demand that they want, and then they come back for more. It was always going to happen with Labour.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
It was always going to happen. They just give in.
I couldn't agree more. Aaron, just one thing. I meant to ask you last time, and this you don't have to be political, you never should. Just to comment on the other thing that Streeting thinks that's acceptable, apart from giving doctors a massive pay rise. It winds me at puberty blockers on kids, 200 of them. I mean, that to me sums up this department of it. It's beyond me, mate. As a doctor, just give me your thoughts on that quickly.
It's very controversial. And if you actually look at the evidence, and that's where I think we really need to be, it's neutral, it's not political. The evidence saying is you shouldn't be giving these puberty blockers to children. Children don't really understand the long-term impact. And how could you? You will look back at your times as a teenager, and you know that your body's going through a lot of changes. It is very difficult. And for some teenagers, it can be very scary. But blocking it shouldn't be done. And even doctors who I know work in this area don't agree with this protocol of puberty blockers. It's a very, very controversial area.
Isn't it fair to say, though, that when you go through puberty, that's when you discover about your sexuality and yourself, and to block that is blocking development? To me, it's disgusting. These kids come from really difficult backgrounds, and it's like we're playing with nature. I think it's disgusting, genuinely.
Yeah, it is. It is actually very, very developing, not just physically, but mentally. What mentally changes happens from puberty blockers is huge, and keeping someone immature in that respect, from both their body and mentally and physical well-being, is not a sensible thing to do.
And Steve, before you say anything, I don't know why anybody would do your job, and I have the utmost ruddy respect for you lot. I honestly, apart from the couple of females that have slept with inmates, but how do you do your job anymore, my friend?
Well, look, I've been around the criminal justice system. I've been a serving prison officer in the past. I've been around for about 35 years. And of course, things are difficult. They've always been difficult, and it's been difficult working in prisons for my members. But the reality is there's been financial vandalism done since 2010 with the years of austerity by the previous government. And you reap what you sow in many respects. And you hit the nail on the head about drones going up to sell windows, been driven by professional fires by organised crime gangs who hire them. It's destabilising our prisons, the amount of drugs getting in. And we've been warning about this since about 2015 on the effects of drones, the destabilisation, the violence against prisoner on prisoner and against our members. It's off the radar. And it's not just the prison service that's broken, it's the whole criminal justice system that's broken.
Well, I was going to say, one sees similarities, of course, between so many different parts of... We talk about police now, and they go on about there aren't enough men and women on the streets, and those are governed by woke bosses, and their priorities aren't what they were. I always think about the prison service. I've spent a lot of time talking to Vanessa Frake, that, you know, your ability to control it with less numbers, with less training, who the hell would want to do that job? And presumably, if you try and defend yourself, the prisoner is called the victim, and you're hauled before an industrial tribunal, and the motivation to do it sort of becomes harder and harder. Just a question: the prison service has failed to spend tens of millions of pounds earmarked for anti-drug security. Why wouldn't they spend the money if it's there for them?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, and it's putting pressure not just on the prison service but on the NHS as well.
Yeah,
with the amount of prisoners being ferried to hospitals because they're out their head on spice and different things. And that does destabilise prisons with the violence and so forth. I mean, I could tell you the horror stories in the past. I'll spare you of that, but lots of our members have come home with life-changing injuries to their loved ones. Lots of people are leaving the job altogether because it's become so intolerable and so violent. And prison officers haven't got a retirement age the same as others. They're made to work to 68.
Isn't it frightening, though, that we've... I mean, I'm old-fashioned, so I don't apologise for this. I always say, when I was growing up, you were scared of the police. Now you see youths in the street laughing at the police, and the police are powerless to do anything. You hear about prison officers who, through lack of training and investment and help, are surrounded by marauding prisoners who can fly drugs with drones through their prisons. Something's wrong. I'm sick and tired of all these lily-livered people who go, "Ooh, rehabilitation." I think if you've committed a crime, you should do your bleeding time. And I don't understand. I think it's part of this... I mean, honestly, Steve, I think it's part of society becoming softer by the minute, if you want me to be honest.
Well, look, I mean, society has changed. There's no doubt about that. Look, all political parties have been to blame, quite frankly. None of them get off the hook. I mean, I was just listening to your previous speaker, Sarah, the MP, and I've got to say, it was just... They've got no solutions, quite frankly, and the very people, the last government that caused a lot of the problems, actually, have now defected to reform. They've caused societal problems. So I don't think reform can make all the noise that they want. The debate has become about division and hatred, and I think that's quite wrong. To be honest with you, Jeremy.
The problem that I have with that, and I understand, I'm not sticking up for any political party here, right?
Neither am I.
I'm talking generally. I mean, I would have an argument with you about a discussion with you about the rehabilitation of prisoners. If I speak to a lot of people in the prison service, they go, "Oh yes, you know, you could do that." There are some people who are evil. There are some people who are bad. There are some people who cannot, right, be rehabilitated. There's talk about, you know, smaller sentences. These people shouldn't go to prison. You might laugh. I think if you get given 5 years, I've never damn well understood at 60 why you don't serve the 5 years. I completely agree that successive governments have underfunded prisons. They've put prison officers in a position where they are not able to carry out their duties, where they're in personal danger. That is a disgrace. And it is all part, in my humble, Steve, of this softening of, you know, oh, the perpetrator's the bloody victim. No, the victim's the person in society whose life's been tainted. Do your crime, and yes, learn from it and come back, but you're going to do your crime, and you're going to understand what you did wrong. It's the same with the police. A good friend of mine's father was a bobby on the beat, and I remember, and I tell this all the time, And he would say, I've left. Why have you left? He said, because in the old days, an old dear got, her back door was taken off and somebody nicked her stuff, and you'd go around there for 3 hours. And he said, you'd make her tea, you'd fix a new lock on the back door, you'd put your arm around her, you'd spend... Now, he said, I fill in 3 ticks on a box and she might see somebody a month's time. That's not what I joined for. And yet we've got a police force that puts people in prison for hurty words. And your story this morning about the drones, to me, forget the politics, I think our bloody priorities are wrong. I really do think our priorities are wrong.
Well, Jeremy, my union has been saying for many, many years that prisons should be about control, order and discipline.
Yep.
We can have debates all day about rehabilitation and does it work? Well, clearly it's not, because we'll get record numbers of prisoners. So the reality is we're just warehousing people. I'm not sure that's a benefit for the general public, because lots of money has been spent incarcerating people. Surely we should be looking at keeping people out of prison for the right reasons. I 100% agree with you, and no one will ever change my mind. Victims should always come first.
Can I do this really quickly? I haven't got much time. James is in Stoke-on-Trent. It's a call. He wants to speak. James, go really quickly. Steve's on the line.
Hi, good morning. I used to work at one of the news prisons in the UK, and regarding the drones flying in, we had Wi-Fi blockers on the perimeter fence. But when they were turned on, they turned off the Wi-Fi for all the neighbouring houses. So the money spent on stopping drones coming in was irrelevant.
Unbelievable. Jesus
James,
Christ. Gentlemen, is that right? Is that right, Steve?
Well, we've been saying for some time there needs to be proper blockers and different things. Listen, I'm sure they've got the technology to stop drones coming in. They just won't spend the money. And you've just said there was an underspend. I've not read the full report yet because it was embargoed until midnight, but the headlines were pretty clear. It's a failing system and one we need to get to grips with through proper, considered measures that actually work. Otherwise, our prisons are going to get worse. There's no doubt about that in my mind.
Just absorbing the full scale of this unfolding catastrophe for Keir Starmer and looking forward, getting my popcorn ready for Prime Minister's questions at lunchtime, because that is going to be quite dramatic. And for once, Keir Starmer is actually there, unless he finds himself some excuse to jet off somewhere. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him, would you?
It's really interesting, the Mandelson thing. It's all over the Sun. It's over every newspaper, and the photos and the videos. I mean, they're absolutely they're as sordid as hell. But we have to cut to the chase, Isabel. Overnight, he faces a criminal investigation for having leaked secrets about this country's government to a convicted paedophile whilst he was a cabinet minister. There's so much to this story, which is, I mean, that is a prisonable offence, and I have no doubt he's going to end up in prison, and I can say that confidently. But you make such a great point. Starmer, this man, right, this Mandelson has had so many comebacks. We said it yesterday, comebacks from lying about passports, lying about loans. Gordon Brown, who I never agreed with, is indignant and has reported that he's gone to the Metropolitan Police overnight. He is accusing Number 10 of a cover-up. The question for me is, how much dirt must he have on so many people in the Labour Party to still be breathing politically, Isabel?
Yeah, quite. It's astonishing, isn't it? You know, I was just running through in my mind all the incredible jobs that Peter Mandelson managed to get, you know, from his multiple cabinet roles to remember he was an EU Trade Commissioner for the UK, casting back many years. That's a massive job, huge money involved in that. And then that highest diplomatic position of all, the UK's ambassador to Washington, a member of the House of Lords. There's almost no bauble that this guy didn't manage to accumulate whilst constantly falling off his perch and being allowed to get back on it. And I think the really dangerous political thing for Starmer now focuses in on what the intelligence services told him, what his advisors told him about the wisdom or otherwise of giving Peter Mandelson that frontline diplomatic role at the time that Mandelson was being considered for the Washington job. And Dan Hodges has actually written a brilliant comment piece in the Mail today.
He has.
We often have him on Talk. And he's pointing out that Keir Starmer had every available means to ask his US intelligence sources, our intelligence allies. He always goes on, doesn't he, about how important that intelligence sharing relationship is. So surely he asked intelligence services over there, knowing that they had these huge files on Epstein, whether there was anything more that the UK government should know about Mr. Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, before he was given that tremendously sensitive position. So did he ask? And if he did ask, did he then ignore the answer, or did he not ask, in which case that is an astonishing dereliction of duty? It is reported that numerous red flags were initially raised by our own experts in the intelligence services about the wisdom and propriety of appointing Mandelson, but using the usual back channels, they were told, guys, the PM's really keen on this. He really does want to give Mandy the job. So could you just sort of find a way to maybe turn those red flags into sort of pale amber ones? Would that be all right? And that seems to be what happened.
And you're so right. And there's also information that the Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, who's mired up to his neck in so much, is apparently, or has always been, close to Peter Mandelson. There was that unedifying view that he was in Downing Street, not in the front, round the back. He went a few months ago when there was a cabinet reshuffle and, apparently still an influenced person. I cannot, in my wildest dreams, imagine that Starmer didn't know. I said it at the beginning, I'll say it again. If he didn't, he's a puppet, an incompetent puppet who needs to go. And he can go because his cabinet could force him out. If he's covered this up and it highlights a bigger problem inside the Labour Party, that this odious slime ball seems to have mess on so many of them, I think that will bring down the government. I think Dan Hodges is right, and Isabel's alluding to a great piece in the Mail. So the Epstein affair is the biggest political scandal of my lifetime. Our Prime Minister says he knew nothing about it. This is why I don't believe him. Give that a read today. Straight question, do you think this brings down the Prime Minister?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it may prove to be the last straw. I don't think it'll happen quickly. It's really mechanically very difficult to get rid of Labour leaders that want to stay put, and we know that he is desperate to cling to office. But it really feels like a sort of final chapter in his catastrophic premiership. And some of us are beginning to wonder what is coming next, and could it possibly be any worse? Bad news, folks. I actually think it could be.
Apparently somebody texted me this morning and said, I agree with that, by the way, that the two people that cleared Mandelson to be the UK's ambassador to the United States were, of course, Keir Starmer, but also Calamity Lammy, who turned out to be a junior minister years ago under... oh, yes, Lord Mandelson. You just wonder with all of these people, man.
I mean, in a sense, I just don't even think anyone needed to go into any detail to know that Peter Mandelson was a highly, highly dangerous appointee for that job. You and I could have said, are you serious? You really bringing this guy back? I mean, his track record is of repeated massive errors of judgment. And as Kev was joking last night, he's not so clever that he doesn't keep getting caught.
No, and let's talk about that. And I heard Kev say that. Somebody said earlier, not only on a government email of which records would exist, you wonder what he actually said to Mandelson, to Epstein in person. I mean, you want to get past the unedified. Have you seen the latest pictures? I mean, yesterday we had the pants. This morning we've got him with some young man putting his socks on. But perhaps the most unedifying is him walking down the street in 2009 with his dog with a sweatshirt on that belongs to Jeffrey Epstein, saying J.E. I mean, the whole thing is weird. I don't even want to get to the sexual side of it, because he tried that yesterday, saying I'm gay, I didn't know what was going on. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about how this man flouted. Maybe he felt that he was above the law, Isabel.
Oh, I think that happens to politicians, even at fairly low levels in Westminster. I've seen, the way that characters change once they're in the palace of Westminster and they have all these people running around after them. That happens at MP level, it happens at backbencher level. So imagine what happens to someone that moves in these gilded circles. And I think what is so repellent to ordinary voters who are just damn well trying to get by and feel that this government throws everything in their way, puts every obstacle in their way of earning a little bit more money than is just the basic to be able to have a good time. What is really repellent is this impression that there is a gilded circle of global elites that just look after each other. They circulate around Davos, they go to the same parties, they pat each other on the back, and perhaps they trade little trade secrets that potentially make, if not hundreds of millions, certainly tens of millions, maybe billions, who knows? These sums of money are far out of reach of any of the voters over which these people quite literally lord it. And as for the wearing of that T-shirt, that brings to mind one of the first scandals of Starmer's premiership. Keir Starmer wearing Lord Ali's provided clothes. What is it with this lot and their clothes provided by other people? I mean, this isn't normal, is it?
No, it's not. And you're going to have to come on every morning because I look forward to seeing you in the morning. Can I just say something? You just said, and I quote, characters change when they go to the House of Commons, even lowly MPs. Operation Ring is still going on. Richard Tice, self-styled love man. I love you, Isabel. I'm going to buy you a ring. Any news in the last 24 hours? Have we got an engagement? People are worried about this situation.
Listen, you can't do updates every 24 hours, or the poor man, I might start worrying for his mental health. He'll be under such pressure.
Sod his mental health. If you were my fiancé, I'd have put a ring on your finger about 3 months ago. I think he's out of order and needs to get his head sorted.
He is too busy doing what he hopes and believes is the best job that he can for his constituents. And I can say that is one MP who has not let it go to his head.
He sent me a text saying, if you have a go at me enough, she'll defend me. I did that right. Isabel, thank you very...
did.
I'm a self-styled royalist, but this is something, I don't know, maybe I did see it coming. Did you see it coming? This man's life is over. He's been booted out of Royal Lodge. What happens next to the ex-Duke of York in your mind, Andrew?
Well, I did see it coming because actually I had a lot of this material. No one believed it, and it was taken out of the book. So this is sort of good to see it all confirmed. I mean, both he and Sarah Ferguson are finished. I think there's a strong case now, particularly since Mandelson's been investigated, for him to be investigated under the misconduct in public office. I think there's also a strong case to investigate Andrew under sex trafficking. We've got so many revelations of women being trafficked to him, and that is a crime. It's nothing to do with underage. But whether he will be charged, I think, is very unlikely. I think he'll do like Juan Carlos, nip off to Dubai before that happens. And I think the interesting question is what happens to Sarah Ferguson.
Yeah, I mean, two separate things. Somebody said to me this morning, it's not going to be enough to move him from house to house. I think the repugnant nature of so many of these accusations that you quite rightly say you raised and people didn't believe, I think he's going to be followed and forced. I mean, maybe abroad is the answer. I'm rather cynical. I'm waiting for somebody to say everybody needs to stop attacking him because of his mental health. I'd like to think more about the victims, that he and his paedophile friends did what they did to.
They have been putting out that. The PR machine has been pumping that out. But I actually talked to a member of his staff last week, and he still doesn't think he's done anything wrong. He can't understand it. He thinks he's been victimized. He's shown no remorse. So that's part of the problem.
He's always been like that, though, hasn't he? He's always been very entitled and somebody who perhaps doesn't see any form of reality. It's a difficult question, the next one, and I struggled with this earlier, but I'll put it to you. Somebody said, I am a fervent royalist and I miss Her Majesty, but what did she think the £12 million payoff to Virginia Giuffre was for then?
Well, I'm afraid that the Queen is also responsible for this, partly for indulging him throughout his life and protecting him. And I mean, many complaints were brought to her during her reign, which she ignored, complaints by the heads of the Foreign Office, by MI6 and others. So I'm afraid, unfortunate it is, that's what I found. And I was heavily criticized when I raised this point in August. But now, indeed, even Buckingham Palace are briefing that that was the case. So I'm afraid, we always thought she put the monarchy before her family, but not in this situation.
Controversial, but painfully probably true. Straight question to you, Andrew. Does the ex-Duke of York end up in prison, in your mind?
Well, I think there's a very strong case to be made against him on so many counts, but whether he will ever be charged or convicted, I just don't know. As I say, I think it's more likely he'll do a midnight flit because the royal family do not want all this aired in court. It's shades of the Burrell case all over again.
Let's bring it to Sarah Ferguson. You touched upon her front page of the Mail this morning, Sarah Vine. What motivated Sarah Ferguson to take her young daughters to visit a convicted paedophile? A different angle, my question, really. I yesterday said disgusting, they were 8 and 10, and I was corrected by somebody who said to me, no, they were 18 and 20, and many people are saying, you know your mind at 18 and 20. Do you think the girls are implicated in any way, Andrew?
Well, the girls were very much under her thumb, and she took them off to meet every famous person she knew, and that's what they've done. They've sort of swapped contact books. I mean, they were taken on some of his trade-funded trips as a special envoy to build their contacts. Certainly, I've got a lot of information which I didn't put in the book about the daughters' activities. These are financial activities, particularly in the Middle East. And we have seen, for example, Beatrice promoting a Saudi Arabian bank recently. So I think the king would be very unwise to bring them too close into the royal fold, because I think there are some more skeletons in that cupboard.
There's undoubtedly skeletons in the York household, and the book, I mean, I've read it, it's brilliant. Do you think that the royal family, we talk publicly, distancing themselves? Do you think any of them are still speaking to Andrew or Fergie at all?
Well, I mean, we get contradictory reports. I know that Charles gave an undertaking to his mother to take care of Andrew. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes? But I do worry that Andrew has been enabled and protected by the whole network of the royal family, of diplomats, courtiers and others, and they haven't entirely come clean. I would like to know from the royal family what they knew, when they knew it, what they did about it, and what they're now going to do about it, because I think public opinion is not going to be assuaged by just leaving Royal Lodge and losing his title.
I think that's the point. I think public opinion, the silent majority, are so invested in the unfairness, and I use that word repeatedly of this story, the privileged, entitled unfairness of Andrew's story, when everybody's grafting and trying to make a living and dealing with all of the stuff that we deal with. I'm not sure him slinking away, as you quite rightly say, is going to be enough, and I think the king is going to have to outline what he knew, when he knew, and what he's going to do. He does have the power to...
itself fit for purpose, the 21st century, or it can continue down its secretive ways, and it's then going to lose public support. So this, I think, in many ways is an opportunity for them, but whether they will grasp it is another question.
We read an awful lot about Gorton and Denton. The Reform Party talk about it as a referendum on Starmer. The Green Party talk in a far more left way than Labour. Labour have had the seat since about 1400 and look like being wiped off the map. What can you tell us to this point, Sir John?
Well, I think the thing to understand about the constituency is a constituency of two halves. Both the two halves which traditionally would have provided a basis for a strong Labour support, and indeed this is a constituency, if you go back to 2019, it's reckoned that 2/3 of people voted Labour. One half, the Denton half, is essentially primarily white. It's relatively working class, therefore traditionally Labour territory, but Labour's connection with the white working class has become much weaker over the years in the wake of Brexit, and this is now a community to whom reform, for whom reform have a certain amount of appeal. The other half, the Gorton half, is ethnically diverse. It has a very substantial Muslim population. It also has a fair number of younger people. Now that historically, again, would have been demographics that would have been Labour's to advantage. But of course, Labour lost ground very heavily amongst Muslim voters in the 2024 election in the wake of Keir Starmer's and Labour's stance on Gaza, but certainly at least in the early phases of the war between Israel and Hamas. There isn't any sign so far of Labour managing to recover that. Crucially, probably crucially, neither Jeremy Corbyn's Your Party or the Workers' Party led by George Galloway are standing in this by-election. That potentially opens the way for the Greens, who were in the general election, were having some success at picking up votes from Muslim voters who are unhappy with Labour. It potentially clears the way for the Greens to try and bring together a fair section of the Muslim vote in the constituency. It's around 1 in 4 of the people who live there, together with a Labour voter who is disaffected with the Labour Party more broadly, to perhaps be able to come through. But it's a big perhaps. Reform are certainly looking as though they're going to be significant contenders. Such limited polling evidence as we have points to that. And even so, we still can't discount Labour, because in the end of the day, I suspect this might well be a by-election which ends up being one with a relatively low share of the vote, with a relatively small majority. And it may just be at the end of the day, the Labour Party can come and sneak through ahead of both Reform and the Greens. But those certainly now seem to be the 3 significant contenders in the constituency.
Really interesting analysis. You said limited polling evidence. However limited that is, where are we at in terms of what you know at this moment, Sir John?
Well, there have been a couple of exercises conducted just before Christmas of the so-called multi-level regression and post-stratification, which sounds complicated, but essentially it's do a big poll and then take the data and model it to try to estimate what would happen in a constituency if there were a general election now. And so the data for Gorton and Denton are available. Both the 2 exercises that were conducted before Christmas put Reform ahead, somewhere at around 33% of the vote. But they then disagreed as to whether or not they were ahead of the Greens or whether they were ahead of Labour. There was more recently a poll, quote unquote, conducted of just 147 people. And I think in truth, one has to say, although this again suggested that those 3 parties were in the head, that's just too small a sample for us to place any great weight on it. Labour will certainly be hoping and arguing to voters, look, whatever your discontent with us, we know you like Nigel Farage even less, and therefore are going to try to persuade people not to vote for the Greens because there's a risk of being a wasted vote. And frankly, the Greens are going to try to turn the tables on Labour on that argument. So probably this early phase of the by-election is primarily a battle between Labour and the Greens to try to establish themselves as the principal challengers to Reform, and then to try to consolidate the anti-Reform vote. And given that Reform probably will struggle to get much more than around 1/3 or so of the vote, the question is whether or not that will be enough if indeed voters decide that it's clear that either Labour or the Greens are best able to defeat them.
Interesting, your analogy, and for us, obviously, as much balance as possible. Tomorrow we've got Charlotte Cadden, the Conservative candidate.
Yeah.
No mention of the Conservatives in what you've said. And obviously, nationally, Kemi Badenoch has been making waves. Certainly, there seem to be a couple of national polls that said that her performance was better. But are they... I know it's a northern town. Are they a non-entity in your mind in this election, Sir John?
Well, look, Jeremy, the Conservatives came 5th in this constituency at the last election. The Liberal Democrats came 6th. The Liberal Democrats are doing little more than flatlining the national polls. And the Conservatives, yes, you're right, there have been some signs of modest recovery, though I think there's also signs that that may now have stalled. So honestly, therefore, as the truth, it doesn't seem realistic that either the Conservatives or the Democrats are going to be significant players in this constituency. One of the problems, however, that Reform do face, we do have Mr. Nick Buckley standing for Advance UK. That, of course, is Ben Habib's party, who have fallen out with Reform, and he has stood for the Mayor of Manchester in the past and done quite well. He used to be a member of Reform, so also by the Social Democratic Party. Now, maybe neither of those 2 candidates will do particularly well, but they will be trying to gain much the same kind of vote as Reform do. So again, you can see how the fact that the Workers' Party of George Galloway and the Your Party are not standing is potentially helping the Greens, but the fact that Nick Buckley is standing and the Social Democratic Party could make life more difficult for Reform.
So what we're looking at in the early stages of the campaign, and the election, peeps, is the 26th, is a sort of a situation where the Greens and Labour are vying to be the primary thing to take on Reform. Reform are trying to bat off the impression that Advance UK or other social democratic parties, Sebastian Moore, could take votes. You believe in the end, from what you've got, and everything's a lottery, I guess, that it will be potentially between Nigel Farage's party and either the Greens with disaffected Labour or Labour with disaffected Greens. That's how you see it at this point.
Very good summary, Jeremy. I think you should go and come and do my job.
No, I'm useless. I've decided, actually, because when I grew up, it was all about the swingometer. It's actually fascinating. It is a fascinating job.
It's just worth noting that we're saying here that it's possible, at least, we don't know, it's possible at least, that this will be a by-election where the two principal contenders will be the Greens and Reform, neither of whom were a significant part of our politics until relatively recently. I mean, more broadly here, this could well be a by-election that continues to underline the way in which our politics in Britain seems to be fragmenting, and that the traditional dominance of conservatism and Labour on our politics, and we are frankly asking the question whether the time is up on the pattern of party politics that we've been used to for most of the post-war period. Did you ever, just very quickly, my friend, did you ever think that the uniparty thing in your lifetime would be destroyed? Because I didn't, and I can genuinely see that happening. No, I mean, I think that, we did see a very substantial challenge to the traditional system from the Liberal SDP alliance when it was first formed in the 1980s, and it was ahead in the opinion polls for a while. But actually, Reform have now been ahead in the polls for longer than that formation ever were. So, of course, in Scotland, the traditional party system has been fragmented. The Scottish National Party are the dominant party there. So that was a clear indication there is nothing inevitable about the continuation of the Conservative Labour duopoly. But of course, what we've got at the moment, we've got this very peculiar circumstance of very substantial policy challenges, the struggle of getting the economy turned around, the difficulties with the health service, the fact that the immigration is proving difficult to control. The Conservatives' reputation was tarnished, trashed by their record in government between 2019 and 2024. And now we've got a Labour administration, which probably even their friends would admit are to some degree challenging, finding it difficult to meet these policy challenges. With that combination, you can see how the ground was potentially open for other parties to make an incursion. And to that extent, at least, the ground has been more propitious for newer parties than probably it has been for 60 years or so.
There's only one story in town. I keep saying this. Yesterday in the Commons, Kemi Badenoch badgered Starmer. We know all about Mandelson, the accusations that he sent emails to the perverted paedophile Epstein with real government secrets that he could have used either in his network of dodgy friends or even to make money in the markets. That's an ongoing case. The police will decide whether the pant man needs to go to prison. I think so. But yesterday, it was all about your judgment, Keir Starmer, that has been called into question about 15 U-turns a time. But did you know about the depth of the relationship? No. Then this. Have a listen, have a watch.
Can the Prime Minister tell us, did the official security vetting he received mention Mandelson's ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein?
So clear. Prime Minister?
Yes, it did.
3 words that even The Guardian, that left-wing rag, believe signal the end. It's over for Starmer, say Labour MPs amid fury over Mandelson. There was a revolt led by Angela Rayner. She stood up and said, you've got to be more transparent. He is definitely on the ropes. We are at talk on Resignation watch. Maybe not for him, but it happened to Boris Johnson over a piece of cake. How many cabinet ministers, how many MPs are going to start looking at those email inboxes and go, this man's a bloody liability. If I want my job, we've got to make change. Not a sight of Ed Miliband. He's definitely plotting. Streeting on the right, sorry to say this, they're all very close to Mandelson. Rayner's apparently acquired a £1 million war chest and is on manoeuvres. It's all going on. Our first guest this hour is a man who spent 30 years in the Commons, latterly as the Deputy Speaker, and I can officially reveal is not in the Epstein files. Good morning, Nigel Evans.
Yeah, good morning. If only, Jeremy. Yeah, no, never met the man.
Mate, in all of your experience, we've got Annunciata Rees-Mogg in just a sec. Have you ever been involved, watched, or had an opinion on a political situation in all of your life? I mean, this reminds me of Profumo. This really does.
Yeah, no, the answer's no. I was in the House of Commons for 32 years, and yesterday, as it was approaching 12 o'clock, I was around about London near Fortnum and Masons, and I went across the road and I tuned in to Prime Minister's questions.
Yeah.
I've never done that before because I knew that day it was going to be quite spectacular. And I didn't realise how spectacular it was. And you've just played the clip where Kemi skewered, he absolutely skewered the Prime Minister by asking him that one simple question. Did he know? Yes, he did. And that, for me, just said absolutely everything. He couldn't say, no, he didn't, because he did. And there's enough evidence to show now that he did know that he appointed Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States of America when he knew the relationship between Mandelson and Epstein was incredibly close, and yet he still insisted on overruling everybody that warned him not to do it. He did it. He took the risk. He took the chance.
And this is my question, Nigel. This is what I don't get. You would know more about this because you've been involved in the, I'm going to say the dark side, but the shenanigans that is the Parliament. I can sit here and say the man's got no moral compass, he's got no brain cells, he doesn't seem to have a plan, right?
Yeah.
But all I can come away from this entire story, and all of my listeners that have been involved this morning, is he must know where the bodies are buried, and he must have, Mandelson, as much muck on people across the Labour Party to have survived dodgy loans, dodgy passports, this. The man is obviously a liability, but has held the Labour Party in the palm of his hand for so long. And if he goes down, because I think he'll go to prison, I make no secret of saying that. You can say I think he will do. Is he going to squeal? How many will go down with him? Because this is serious stuff, man.
If you think that my book that I'm writing, Jeremy, is interesting, and I know you think it is, because I'm on chapter 25, can you imagine the book that Peter Mandelson could write about the Labour Party? Peter Mandelson has nothing left to worry about now. He's got absolutely nothing. He's been thrown under the bus by Gordon Brown and then latterly by Peter Mandelson. He's got absolutely nothing left. He's going to write that book. And can you imagine how interesting that book is going to be? Because it is going to be about his time in Parliament, his time when he was sacked twice, his time when he was brought back by Gordon Brown and made Foreign Secretary. It's going to be an incredible book. He knows where the bodies are buried because he buried most of them. It's going to be a fascinating insight into the book of New Labour.
He's a bit of a sleazeball, though, isn't he? I mean, I can't, the unedifying view of the pants and all that, and taking all that aside, the £8 million house, whilst your husband, who's whatever Ronaldo is getting 12 grand off Epstein for an osteopathy course. 75 grand in 325 grand instalments I didn't know went into my bank account. What I found really interesting yesterday, which you haven't done, which is why I love you, is there were journalists that came on programmes on this station yesterday, and journalists in the building who were still trying to defend this piece of whatever. Does he have tentacles that spread so far? Because the man, I mean, do you know what I thought one of the lowest things was on Monday, that we were the only Tuesday I picked up on and I kept playing? Somebody did this once in television, I won't name names. Oh, I didn't know what was going on the island, I'm gay, he says. Well, there's a picture of him in his underpants with a semi-clad woman giving him a massage. I mean, that's absolutely farcical. He is up to his neck in it, and I don't think he's a particularly nice person at all. I think it highlights massive problems.
Yeah, I think listen, he's been cancelled now. There's no two ways about it. Politically, he's had comeback after comeback. There is no comeback after this, and Peter Mandelson knows that completely.
Does he go to jail, Nige?
No, he will go to jail. I'm absolutely certain. Looking at everything that's there, he gave insider information on market-sensitive stuff that only he could know, that would move markets, which could have meant that either Epstein would have told other people about what was about to happen as far as the bailout in the Eurozone, which would have made people significant sums of money. I've got absolutely no doubt at all that he's facing jail now. Absolutely. So him losing his titles, it's the least of it. I thought a lot from Keir Starmer, but the reality is, within minutes of him saying that it was going to be the cabinet secretary that was going to decide what information we saw or didn't see, the Labour members of Parliament, and he's got a significant majority in the House of Commons, remember me, significant, it's a massive majority. They turned on him.
Stay there, Nige. Stay there. I want to bring Annunziata Rees-Mogg in, head of comms at Popular Conservatism. Annunziata, I don't think we've ever spoken, have we?
No, we haven't. Good morning. Lovely to speak.
You see, she's clearer. By the way, before anybody says anything, I've just had a text in, and it said, I tuned in to listen to Nigel Evans, and I think he looks like Bill Nye from Love Actually. He's laughing, man. Annunziata, I've got your brother on in half an hour. I'll ask you something about him in a minute. But honest to God, so many people getting involved. Nigel's just had his say. How do you at Popular Conservatism look at what's happening? Because this is probably the biggest scandal to hit Britain politically since the Profumo affair, isn't it?
I think Profumo, and actually worse than Profumo. Profumo lied, but there wasn't corruption at the heart of government. And this is really highlighting quite how bad the corruption was. It was telling secrets to foreign powers. It was trying to influence British policy on the banks, the bankers' bonus tax. It was leaking when our Prime Minister was going to quit office. All of these are very, very deeply corrupt and at the very, very heart of our government. I think this investigation needs to go incredibly far because we don't know what other things it might have affected. Has it changed what's happening with the Chagos deal, for example? We know his fingerprints are all over that. And what happened with the meeting with Palantir that was off the books when Keir went over to America? We need to know exactly how far this rot goes, but at the moment it's looking very serious. I agree that Mandelson will end up in prison, and if it's not here, it will be in the US. The material non-public information laws in America are very strong, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can be arrested and charged in America. Now, I think we've got to do it first here, because fundamentally this is a British problem. It has highlighted the complete distrust that this Labour government and its predecessors deserve. No wonder people don't trust politicians. They were right not to.
I couldn't agree more, and I think we would all agree. And I keep, Nigel knows this, and Annunziata, we haven't spoken before, but I keep going back to a text I had some weeks ago from a person who said, Jez, I've never really been switched on politically. I guess you'd call me as part of the silent majority, but I've woken up. And there's a word he kept using to me in the text, which was unfairness. And whether you talk about migrants and the whole situation. And he said, the problem for any government is that when the silent majority wake up, it doesn't matter the colour of that government, they're in real trouble. You know what I mean, don't you, Nigel? I think this government has managed in 18 months to do something almost worse than took the Tories 14 years. And people's trust, and Annunziata's right, is dissipating by the minute.
Yeah, no, by the second. And I wouldn't have been surprised if I'd woken up this morning to have read that Morgan McSweeney had been thrown under the bus. They've absolutely thrown Mandelson under the bus completely. He has now been cancelled by the Labour government. And I think Keir thinks that that's going to save him. But last night we saw something in the House of Commons I've not seen for quite some time. And that was that the Prime Minister went from the dispatch box saying that, oh, no, 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 the Cabinet Secretary is going to decide what papers are going to be seen. And within an hour, the Chief Whip of the Labour Party was in discussions with the Chief Whip of the Conservative Party saying, well, we can amend the amendment that has been put down. A manuscript amendment was put down in the House of Commons, which was an emergency amendment to an amendment that the government had already put down to say that it's now going to be the Spooks Committee, as I call it. They are going to be the ones that decide what papers are now going to be revealed. I don't think Morgan McSweeney can survive, but putting him under the bus isn't going to be enough.
Well, it was interesting because he was asked about Morgan McSweeney, and I thought, like Nigel's just intimated, that he'd just go, what's it? But yet again, showing no political judgment at all. Starmer stood up and said, he helped me get elected, he's central to my team. And you'd have to say they'll probably go down together. And also, just very quickly, the view on the front bench, the realisation, I think, that these untalented people were about to be found out was a very good watch.
Yeah. Their facial expressions were priceless. The whole of yesterday's debate, actually, I think was brilliant, and it was the House of Commons at its best. The Conservatives did an incredibly good job, a forensic job, of making sure that the public can find out what's happened. And I think we need to extend that, because we've got to remember that Mandelson was at the very heart of the Blair government. Blair's government changed our constitutional settlement and undid a lot of our democratic rights. We've got to find out how much this has influenced our agreement with how we're governed, whether it's the Supreme Court, the European Court of Human Justice, kowtowing to foreign laws. We've got to make sure that all of this web, which is despicable, is undone.
Do you believe, very basic language, but do you believe that Mandelson will squeal if he goes down? Do you think he'll implicate others?
I think at this point he's got nothing to lose. He must have millions somewhere.
But not enough to pay for his boyfriend, now husband's osteotherapy course. I cannot. That everybody says, why do you keep mentioning? Oh, there's 8 million, which I've got from Epstein or other people because I like a few quid. But my boyfriend, who's 50, it doesn't matter the age difference, who's now my husband, he can't afford a 12 grand osteotherapy course. What's going on there?
It's absolutely extraordinary, and it was never. I mean, I think it came out on Monday that he got $75,000 US. Someone like Mandelson was never going to risk their entire reputation for $75,000.
No.
The money will show us what's actually been going on, whether it's the contracts with the big banks or separate payments.
Do you think that others will? Do you think that others, whether he squeals or an investigation opens it, do you think others from high office might fall and suffer as well?
Well, we've already seen Gordon Brown trying to cover his own bag. I think we will find other Labour politicians trying to do the same, to rescue their reputations. And Mandelson himself has nothing to lose. Why wouldn't he?
Amazing. Nigel, as a overview of everything, and it is extraordinary, the feeling amongst the listeners this morning. You can also, it's palpable, you can feel it in the studio. We are on Resignation Watch because it'll take one to go and then it'll be like a house of cards and people are waiting for that. How long do you imagine are embattled? I mean, I say to you both what I've been saying all morning. It's on the front of this rag, The Guardian. You know you're in trouble, to be fair. How long do you think he's got, Nigel?
Hardly any time at all, because Angela Rayner started the ball moving yesterday by insisting that the Spooks Committee was the one that was going to do this. Don't forget, he's got a huge majority, a massive majority, and yet he was forced to climb down from Prime Minister's questions when he said absolutely that it was going to be the Cabinet Secretary that decided what papers were going to be revealed, and within an hour he had to change his mind. I absolutely think, and I never thought this was possible before the May elections, that Starmer could go. I now absolutely think that he's on the ropes, and that the machine is already moving, Jeremy. And Annunziata's got it absolutely right. It's lovely to see you, Annunziata.
Hello. And you.
See you.
Look at me.
I've not seen you for quite some time. And I've not seen politics quite like this in my entire career. I think he's absolutely on the ropes. People are on manoeuvres, and I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the day, both McSweeney and him are gone.
Well, Annunziata, just to finish, that's a cooling thought. Nigel, don't go anywhere, it's brilliant. You do realise, and I think Nigel's right, we had this from Isabel, there's no definitive proof of this, but there will be meetings already that if he does get forced out, OK, and Nigel's nodding his head, Deputy Speaker, you would know there are meetings. I just have to be very careful as I say this, Annunziata. The interim Prime Minister of the United Kingdom will be David Lammy. And I would like to say, as I said about an hour ago, for any young people or people who have lost their job and aspire to achieving anything, if that man can be the Prime Minister even for 5 minutes, I think we can all achieve anything. That is, I mean, that we can laugh. How much of a sobering thought is that, Annunziata?
Well, fortunately, interims don't generally get to do very much, and there is zero chance the party will vote for him. But I think we've really got to be scared about what comes next, because I don't think Rayner will win. She's been embroiled in corruption herself. The last thing you want to do is replace a corrupt Prime Minister with another one, which, where Streeting's too close to Mandelson, basically leaves you with Miliband. Oh. 3 years of Miliband, we're in real trouble.
It's great to have you both on. And Annunziata, I know you won't mind. I have some bloke called Jacob Rees-Mogg on at 10 to 10 this morning. He said, if she's coming on, I'm coming on. Could you give me something that I don't know about your brother that I can put to him if he's beating me intellectually in an argument?
I've absolutely no idea. He is exactly what he seems, and a very good brother.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what. Tell somebody off air I need something. The front page of a Labour-supporting newspaper, the headline screams out, "It's over for Starmer, say Labour MPs amid fury over Mandelson." It's all over, isn't it, Graham Stringer?
I think it's now a question of when, not if. In effect, by the Commons, including vast majority of Labour MPs, refusing to vote for the amendment that the Prime Minister put forward, although technically it wasn't. In fact, that was a vote of no confidence. And it's very difficult to see in a relatively short period of time how the Prime Minister can stay on after the shambles that was yesterday. The real question that Labour MPs have to answer is not just that the Prime Minister has made too many mistakes, which he has. It is how is he replaced and by whom?
Where do you sit on that? I mean, we had the Community Secretary Steve Reid on Sky this morning. I want to play this to you. He said, this isn't your Prime Minister's fault at all. Let's just listen to Steve Reid if we can, Graham.
All that's happened here, it's dreadful what has happened here, but Peter Mandelson lied not only to the Prime Minister, he lied to the Prime Minister's entire team. He's betrayed the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, he's betrayed 2 Prime Ministers, and he's betrayed the country.
So
now,
has he betrayed Morgan McSweeney? Is that what you're saying?
He lied to everybody. And now what people need to see the extent to which he lied, and that will happen as these documents are released so people can see.
Can you answer the question? Is Morgan McSweeney safe in his job?
Yes, of course he is. The problem when someone lies isn't that they lie to you, because there can be liars in any walk of life. It's what happens when you find out you've been lied to. And what the Prime Minister did months ago was contact Peter Mandelson at 5 a.m. in the morning and sack him on the spot from his job as US ambassador.
Graham, I take it that you and a majority of colleagues on the back benches don't buy what Steve Reid is saying.
There's 2 issues about the Prime Minister's judgment over the last 24 hours. One is how he dealt with the Commons. Everybody makes mistakes. Journalists make mistakes. Politicians make mistakes. He made a mistake in appointing Mandelson as the ambassador to the United States. He should have said at the beginning yesterday that he'd made a mistake. He knew what he knew, and it would have given the Commons and those Labour MPs who were going to support him an opportunity to say, well, he's fessed up. We know what's going on. And he's agreed to put forward the documents. In actual fact, he gave a victory to the leader of the opposition, who nailed him on whether he knew of the continuing relationship with Mandelson, and the Labour MPs didn't support or believe that we were going to get all the documentation around that. So in one very important debate, he failed twice.
I mean, it's really interesting. You described it as it's a grave error of judgment, but within the wider view, and I don't say this actually with any joy, because I respect, and I mean this, I utterly respect you, Graham, for coming on. I know you're a man that does your job for your constituents. You know, I don't mean this the wrong way. You're not one of them high-flying Islington lot. You're what I used to call a proper Labour MP. When you look, Graham, at this scandal, when you look at how U-turn after U-turn has impacted on the popularity of a party who 18 months ago got in with the biggest majority post-war, is this a Labour Party you recognise?
It's certainly a Labour Party that's changed. I mean, there's two questions there. Our government shouldn't make as many mistakes as this government has made. I mean, people talk a bit about U-turns. I've wanted most of those U-turns. It's the original decision, the original mistakes that shouldn't have happened. And there comes a limit to how many mistakes a government can make and continue as it is. I think some of those mistakes show that they're not the priorities that previous governments would have made. If you take the Chagos Island, for instance, which is something that deeply annoys me, we're going to find, 35 billion to pay for something that we own. That's incredible. I don't believe that previous Labour governments would have done that. And if you come to one of the core issues that annoy Labour voters, the clue's in the name of the Labour Party. I think that everybody who possibly can deserves the dignity of work and to get a job if it is at all possible. This party announced, my party announced, I think last week, that we were no longer going to look at changing the benefit system in a way that would give people a better chance to get jobs. I think that a measure of any Labour government is how many people it can get into jobs and get off benefits. People want that, the public want that, and we're not doing it.
Is this Labour Party still the party for you? Have you thought about defecting to Reform, my friend?
I get asked that regularly on programmes because I agree with Reform on Europe and one or two other things. I don't agree with them fundamentally, the direction it's going, so there's no chance I would join Reform. And my party has changed. There are some of the policies that it has that I don't like. They're not the policies. For instance, cancelling local elections, I think, is embarrassing and outrageous. That's not something a Labour Party should be doing. But I joined the Labour Party, not agreeing with every policy it had and wanting to improve it, and that's still my position. If I left the Labour Party every time I disagreed with a single policy, I'd have left the Labour Party almost as soon as I joined it.
I know you well enough to know from your demeanour, you're a very honest guy, and that's why I said it. I genuinely mean that, but I can tell from your demeanour that things have changed immeasurably. Two questions for you, my friend. How long does Starmer last? You started by saying it's not if, it's when. How long does he last?
I don't know. I wouldn't be able to put a figure on that. I think the next crisis point for him is the Denton and Gorton by-election, Gorton and Denton by-election. But the real crisis point, I think, will come after the local elections if they're as bad as people expect. But I mean, predicting the future is a mug's game.
Yesterday, Angela Rayner, who had to resign because she hadn't paid stamp duty, led the charge. She stood up in a very controlled way and said that there should be more transparency with the release of those papers over the Mandelson debacle. There's no doubt that people are on manoeuvres. I haven't seen hide nor hair of Ed Miliband. To many on the right in this country, the thought of Miliband or Rayner is even more frightening than Keir Starmer. But it would be fair to ask you this. If not him, whom?
I don't know. I mean, it's a real dilemma. If you go through most of the contenders that you will know as well as I do, they've nearly all got away with the majorities. And it's not a good look for a leader of a party who's really, he or she is concerned about their own survival. So I think the Labour Party's got a genuine difficulty in who it chooses and how they choose them. If possible, we want to avoid the shambles that was the Conservative Party in the last government, where they kept changing the leader. The elections were chaotic, and they ended up with a historic thrashing in the last general election.
You would be in agreement if I described him as a dead man walking.
It's not a phrase I would use, but I understand what you mean, yes.
Final question, which so many people, and the texting saying respect to Graham Stringer, because you represent your constituency, you're not sat in Islington. Here's a question for you. Nobody that listens to this, myself included, can understand how a man like Mandelson can have survived so many scandals and have survived for so long. Can I ask you a question? I think he's going to prison. On the way down, he presumably must have muck on everybody. Do you fear that he'll squeal and other Labour high-ranking people will be brought to task?
I don't think I can answer that, not because I'm avoiding it, because I don't know the answer. What I would say is he deserves due process like everybody. One of the disturbing things yesterday was that he was presumed guilty, and there's a lot of evidence that looks pretty bad, but the police are looking at it, and he does deserve due process. Whether any other senior figures in British society, including the Labour Party, are included, I don't know. I would have no way of knowing that.